Thank you all. I'd like to welcome you to the Roberts Creek Community Association's Forestry, Sustainable Forestry and Forest Use Information Evening. Thank you all for coming. We weren't sure when we thought about doing this, whether we would have 2 people or 20 people, and we've got a reasonable number. I haven't actually counted heads, but thank you. My name's Sarah Bradley. I'm the current president of the Roberts Creek Community Association. And I'd like to lead off with acknowledging that we are on the traditional and unceded territory of the Shishal and Squamish nations here in Roberts Creek, for which we are truly, truly blessed. I'd also like you all to take just a minute to have a look around at the Roberts Creek Hall, which is past 85 years old and has over the last 5 years had substantial revision, not renovation other than the kitchen and bathroom. We have renovated those. But we have added a roof, we've added insulation, we've added a fabulous air exchange and heat pump. So we can now operate as a cooling center. We can operate as a safe harbor in a winter storm. We have a shower in the bathroom. And I would also like to acknowledge that this has come with no small thanks to community forests who have provided significant funding towards the work that's been done on the hall. I'd also like to thank Community Forests and ELF for both being here today, because I understand that there was a little bit of a dispute this morning, or possibly not a dispute, but could have been a dispute. Anyway, I understand that there's a difference of opinion happening currently around cut block EW24. So thank you both for being here. This is not the venue for debating whether or not that block should be logged. So I'm going to reiterate what this evening is. The RCCA was approached with the suggestion that we should refrain from accepting funding from community forests. As a board, we thought that that would be financially irresponsible of us to hamstring future boards with such a policy. But we realized in the conduct of the conversation around that suggestion that we as a board didn't really know enough about what ELF is, does, stands for, how it operates, what Sunshine Coast Community Forest is, does, stands for, how it operates in our community. And so sitting around that board meeting, we really felt like if we didn't know enough, perhaps other community members also didn't know enough. And so we approached what we felt were the 3 major players in Roberts Creek as far as forest use and sustainable forestry, those 3 major players being Sunshine Coast Community Forest, Elphinstone Logging Focus, and BC Timber Sales. BC Timber Sales declined to join us this evening. You can talk to them directly about why. ELF and Community Forests said, sure, we would be happy to come and make presentations and answer questions. It's not an open mic, so the questions have been pre-submitted. The topic really is the mandate of the 2 organizations, what they do, how they do it, and how it contributes to the value that we gain from the forests in our backyard. One way or another, we all gain something from the forests in our backyard. What that is varies from person to person. So we're not making judgments here about whether one person's gain is better than another's. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is asking for information. Certainly that's what I'm doing. That's what the RCCA board is doing. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Ross Muirhead from ELF. I believe he's going to speak first. Thank you very much. Test, test.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks, Sarah, for the introduction and everybody showing their interest tonight in a very important subject. I'm Ross Muirhead, and I'm with Elphinstone Logging Focus. So, as Sarah suggested, maybe a lot of people know what our mandate is. So I'm just going to, before I kind of get into a longer conversation, I'm going to read what our mandate is from our website because it's been clearly written. And if you are interested in the work that we do, our research reports, campaigns, the website is simply loggingfocus.org. So this is under who we are. Elphinstone Logging Focus Society, ELF, is a nonprofit BC-based environmental group providing information to the public on proposed logging in important forest lands. The organization's mission is to protect key forests and habitat in order to conserve ecosystems and support recreation, tourism, and community resilience. ELF examines the forest industry's 5-year plans for due diligence covering wildlife, archaeological, recreational, and hydrological assessments. By conducting field studies prior to logging, we can be proactive in achieving our goals. Our foremost goal is to protect provincial forests for their long-term ecological functioning. Since older forests, 250 years plus, have evolved to a fundamental part of the Earth's life support system, a large percentage, up to 30%, needs to be protected. Intact forests provide many key services, including oxygen production, slope stability, water quality and flow control, fish and wildlife habitat, the gene pool, carbon sequestering, wildcrafting, recreation tourism, spiritual nourishment, and Aboriginal values. ELF is not opposed to harvesting of second growth forests using partial cut techniques, however, is opposed to industrial-style logging and road building, and seeks a complete ban on clear-cut logging across the Sunshine Coast in the province, since it destroys ecosystems. We believe that short-term logging revenues pale in comparison to the longer-term environmental services that older forests generate for present and future generations. So that's our mission statement. Yes, I did contact the RC, the community association here, after kind of numerous times seeing that they have received grants from the community forests. Not that we're have any, we're not on the board, so we don't know what their financial situation is. And of course, the hall needs ongoing revenues for maintenance. Our main concern, though, was that we were wondering if the board is aware of the official community plan committee, which over the years have developed a policy of trying to expand the Mount Elphinstone Provincial Park. So some background to that is, so in the early 1990s, after the Brundtland Report, which you may be familiar with, that was held in Rio, BC and other jurisdictions decided to try and increase the amount of land protected from, BC was at anywhere, depending on the region, anywhere from 3 to 6% of the land base protected, and so they agreed to that Brundtland objective of 12%. So under the NDP, there was that objective set. So some of you may remember that. George Smith will remember that. And so they started out something called the Protected Area Strategy, and the Sunshine Coast was included in with the Lower Mainland as part of that strategy, looking at various areas that could be candidates for protection. So and then there was kind of like a committee of industry, regional governments, environmentalists, And we must say industry had the largest kind of influence on the protected area strategy around ranking of possible new protected areas, which basically they were provincial parks. And so on the lower mainland, it came out that the Stein Valley was ranked #1. And then what was the last ranked proposed area was the Mount Elphinstone protected area. Some of you may remember Rick O'Neill and Adrian Belshaw. Adrian was an RD director, and of course Rick, who passed away in 2019, was a local ecologist. And there were other people also within Roberts Creek. Donna Sugar was involved, and others. And so they, because we had this amazing resource here of the Elphinstone Forest, they were proposing to the provincial government that Mount Elphinstone become a nice protected area, provincial park. Their original application was for 1,500 hectares at the time. So because the ranking for Mount Elphinstone is interesting. Rick explained this to me a number of times, but basically industry, it was a long, drawn out process over 6 or 7 years. And industry lobbied the government so hard on it that Mount Elphinstone got ranked the lowest, as I said earlier. It got ranked the lowest, ironically, even though it had the highest biodiversity. Anybody who knows what ecology is, the highest biodiversity starts at the lower elevation and works its way up. Tetrahedron, wonderful park, lowest biodiversity because it's subalpine and a lot of rock and ice. Elphinstone, the forest here, from 150 meter elevation up to about 700. What's the indicator of biodiversity in that area? The mushroom species, 165 species of mushrooms, okay? So you don't find that anywhere else on the Sunshine Coast, and probably not in BC. But because it was ranked the lowest, because it had the best timber, right? And it had the easiest access to the highway, bang down to the log sort, lower operating costs for industry. So at the end of the day, Rick and Adrian got a phone call and from the Minister of Forests, forget who the minister at the time was, but he said, Rick and Adrian, we're gonna give you 24 hours to tell us where you want your park, and we're giving you 140 hectares. And they said, what? We've been advocating for all this time for 1,500 hectares for a good forestry network connecting, it's 8 kilometers from Wilson Creek over to Robinson Creek. And so they said we need 1,500 hectares to have long-term functioning, ecosystem. And the minister said, we don't care. The budget we have left after we protect the Stein, the Tetrahedron, the Cepheus, and all these other numerous parks over in the lower mainland, right? So in their minds right away, we got shortchanged, we're getting screwed around, and it was a take it or leave it proposition, right? So Rick and Adrian put their heads together and went, oh, okay, what are we gonna do about this? So they made the decision to they said, okay, you're forcing us into this, we're not happy with it, but 140 hectares, I guess that's what it's gonna be. So they chose 3 separate parcels. That's why we have that legacy now, right? The only provincial park, shall we make that noted, in BC that's separated into 3 separate parcels. The worst land use planning, you know, if anybody went to UBC Planning Department and said, hey, how do you put together a robust plan? It's not in 3 separate parks, okay? But nevertheless, they had a strategy. They were going, okay, maybe sometime down the road, future governments, more enlightened public stewards will go 3 separate parcels. That's not viable over the long term. Let's connect them up and actually create that 1,500 hectares. So that's kind of where we came in after Rick kind of, was getting interested in other issues. So that's about when I moved to the coast from North End. I met Rick, and I kind of felt like I became his mentor. He told me all the history and gave me a stack of his files from all those planning committee minutes. I don't know if Donna Sugar's here, but she was very instrumental in that planning table also. And so it comes down to it. That's what ALF is. That's our main campaign. Expand this park once and for all. All the science is there. We've done tons of different research. We hired Wayne McCory, preeminent. He's a biologist, but he's also a conservation. I call it a conservation biologist. And he went through all the past reports, and he did a very comprehensive conservation review. We've presented it numerous times to various ministers. They've always said, we're not interested. From the Liberal governments, NDP, Liberal, NDP, we're not interested in expanding this park until we have another land use plan. So Nicholas Simons has always been saying that to us. I can't do anything about it until we have another land use plan, because governments don't like to make decisions outside of kind of a formal, land use planning process that involves other stakeholders. So now to bring you up to speed, as you probably all know, there is a Seashell Victoria modern land use plan, they call it. And we've submitted to that committee a whole bunch of different, research and Zoom presentations during COVID. And there's different representation on that committee, mainly from the Seashell Nation, there's planners from Victoria, from the Minister of Forests. And so they're coming out with their kind of final recommendation, including what's happening on Mount Elphinstone, but also for the entire SWAYA, right? By October 23, I think it is, so the fall of next year. So we don't know where that's going to land. We don't know if they're going to accept the original 1,500 to 2,000. It varies depending on what boundaries you look at. And so in the meantime, we're forced to kind of, in a way, fight every cut block that pops up, right? Community forest cut blocks pop up here. BC timber sales cut blocks pop up here within the original 1,500 hectare proposal area, which, did I mention this? It is registered as a Sunshine Coast bylaw 641, right? The 641 bylaw wraps up a whole bunch of planning things for Roberts Creek, including the park expansion. So there's Kelly. I'm giving you a little education here because he's the future director. And so, as hopefully in our mission statement, it's quite clear. We're not opposed to all logging, okay? So we'd like to see ecological kind of base logging go on. I mean, back in the early days, they had Herb Hammond come over, the foremost eco-forester. He came up with a plan. He said, because the Mount Elphinstone, the Elphinstone unit as it is about 8,000 hectares. That was a part of the original protected strategy, was the 8,000 Elphinstone map area. But then the park became lower. But yeah, Herb Wilkinson said you can do a sustainable logging across that vast area. And you might not even see the logging, the evidence of the logging. You take out 15% here and there. Don't put in big logging roads. Do some alternative systems that are proven. You can have a sustainable yield and yet not destroy the forest in the meantime. So that's our biggest beef against community forests and BC timber sales is clear-cut logging, which you need to have industrial scale logging roads if you're going to do clear-cut logging. And logging roads can be just as worse over the long term for landscape functioning as stripping all the trees away. And, you know, so the cup logs have been reduced in size from, you know, if you were driven to Carmana, that's the old style, where you just from the valley bottom down to the river, back up to the top of the ridges again. Those days are gone, but we still have, so in the interior, I think the restriction is like 60 hectares. On the coast, it's 30. But what BC Timber Sales does in particular, they string together their cup logs. So you may have 4 cup logs strung together by a logging road, and you add it up, and it's like, wow, you're up to 40, 45, 50 hectares all strung together. So yeah, we've tried to you know, work with BCTS, and we've had some, I must say, because BCTS has a bigger land base, they can defer a block, shut down a block, move that volume somewhere else. Some of the problems with community forests is because it has a more concentrated tenure area. So one is in the Wilson Creek watershed, which there's 0 old growth left in the Wilson. Then they have tenure up in the Angus Gray Chapman. That's a larger area. And then Half Moon Bay is again a smaller tenure area has been hit pretty hard over the years. So I think, you know, our position with community forests is, we say kind of tongue-in-cheek, go fill your boots with the tree farms, all those wonderful tree farms that have been logged over the years, that have been planted, that have been thinned. You've put some investment into them, but you have to stop logging the mature native forests. That's just the bottom line for us. Like, okay, so community forests and BCTS and all the major logging companies, and they're you know, enabled by the provincial government to just go into these areas, and the provincial government goes, there's 0 value to these forests until we log them, right? So that's like that whole economic position of that these forests are worth $0 until they're logged is really running us into big problems, right? So now the latest, it's not that, you know, it's like 20 years old science. It's scientific policy because you can't quite pin it down, but you know, the general rule of thumb is 1 hectare of intact functioning forest should be valued at $10,000 a hectare per year in environmental services, right? We're all, if we didn't have a functioning ecosystem, we wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be holding this microphone. You know, we're that connected to ecosystems and to, you know, the benefits that nature provides. I don't have to tell you that, you know. But we need to start looking at intact forests and saying, okay, they have a value to us of $10,000 per hectare, and calculate that into the spreadsheets that they do. So, you know, it drives us kind of crazy when you have, you know, say a relatively small cup lot, 15 hectares, and they may get, community forests may get, you know, gross might be $1.2 million out of a beautiful, intact, temperate rainforest. You might get 1.2, 1.5, depending what the market is. Half of that, approximately, goes to costs right off the top. You're paying your contractor half of that because he's got big, you know, logging is expensive. He's got his crew to pay. So right away you can just swipe that, take that off the spreadsheet. That's your sunk costs. So now you're left with maybe, you know, $750,000. But when you compare that to $10,000 in environmental services every year for the 7 generations, right? That's our new planning horizon. Everybody with me? 7 generations down should be the planning horizon. Then, you know, it doesn't make sense today, tomorrow, and most importantly, in the future. So that's kind of where we, you know, I mean, again, it's 2022, right? We shouldn't be clear-cut logging, putting in big, heavy logging roads. the science, the science is there, but now the evidence is coming out too. How many washouts did we have in November 13th, 14th, 15th? Stevens Creek blew out. BC timber cells logged in the headwaters of Stevens Creek. The next one, on Day Road, Goff Creek blew out. BCTS logged in the headwaters. We tried to stop that one. Then down on Day Road, it was Clack Creek blew out. I was standing there with the Roberts Creek Fire Department. First, the water, the headwaters, you can look at the maps if you think I'm not telling the truth. I'll show you the headwaters of Clack Creek. I'll show you the 1 kilometer new logging road that went through about 6 channels, 6 feeder streams that all ended up making the main channel of Clack. I don't know if anybody saw that YouTube video that was circulating. So basically, Clack Creek, the culvert wasn't big enough. It started to block up. The water pooled up. The water started going over the road. The pavement started breaking. And then from there, it was just a quick cascade of pavement breaking in. Then it was the exposed culvert. And then the soil around the culvert washed away. And then there was nothing remaining to hold the culvert in place. And the culvert just went bang and just like blew off. And it's still down. Well, both of the culverts on Goff and Clack are still sitting there today. Then on Flume Creek on Beach Road, that blew out. BCTS logged in the headwaters there about 2013. And then over in Red Roofs, what happened there? Same thing. Pavement, soil around the culvert, and the culvert pinged and blew out. In all these cases, these are called catastrophic events, okay? So that means a complete loss of infrastructure. Luckily, there were no people driving along that road, or they anticipated the flooding and they were stopped. Not the case with the 5 people in the outside of Pemberton on the Duffy Lake Road. You probably heard the CBC News. That was yesterday when they finally kind of determined, yes, it was, what was the trigger point initiation for that landslide? It was an old logging road up above, poorly maintained, ditches overflowing, water just cascading over slopes, saturating slopes, and the physics of that are, slope, the ground can't, it loses its integrity and it just it just slides off the slope. And then, so Red Roofs blew out. There's we did some analysis. We think that the Community Forest HM50 was a contributing factor. Their report that they had Statlu Environmental Consulting, Community Forest asked them, the question was, did any of their logging in HM50 contribute to the Red Roofs washout? And then also in conjunction, Kenyon Creek is the creek that goes under Red Roofs. So did their operations, clear cutting, road building, contribute to what they call a peak flow event on Kenyon Creek? And their conclusion was, no, it did not. However, they did their site visit, I think, 3 months after the fact. And I was there on November the 15th. I was out storm watching, which is kind of fun. I didn't think it would take me out there, but after I looked at Stevens and Day Road and Beach Ave, I went, oh, let's go see what's happening out in Half Moon Bay. Couldn't cross Red Roofs, and I thought, oh, I wonder what's happening, up in Kenyon Creek. So I followed the highway up to the Forest Service Road to Big Tree. You go up there, that Forest Service Road was completely flooded out. There was block culverts on the spur roads leading into HM50. At that point, there was another block culvert higher up leading right into the edge. So HM50 borders the Kenyon Creek watershed. So there was water just flowing off that side of the cut block, flowing off a previously logged area, which maybe was 10 years old. So there was a heck of a lot of water flowing, redirected and into Canyon Creek. So, you know, one thing, logging, if you're doing a logging plan, you have to assure that under, you know, different conditions, you don't contribute to what they call a peak flow event. Because peak flows create hazards, and the hazards are how it affects downstream infrastructure. And then after I saw that, I went over to Angus Creek, or they call it the Seashell Crossover Road, just past the bike park, and there was a blowout there. There was a contractor opening up the culvert, opening up the road. And then the Ministry of Forest, they sent over an engineer, and she did an assessment. She went up on an old community forest cut block. The road up there was multiple culverts. Well, they had removed all the culverts, but there was just water redirected over slopes, not into existing channels. So it just was water redirected over the slope, and it caused, again, soil saturation, and that's what blew out that slope and took out the road and the culvert below. So just to say, clear-cut logging, road building has long-term impacts, besides losing all our environmental services. So one thing ELF does is a lot of research. I put out some stuff on the back there. You're welcome to take our health trail map. This is a trail that crosses across the whole Elphinstone slope. It's 5 more minutes, okay? And we try to link the trail up so it connects up to all the existing intact forests. So it has to weave around some of the cut blocks, but for the most part, it does a good job of taking you right from the kind of the eastern side of the park proposal area all the way up to the west. There's some other reports that if you want to get into it a bit more, Community Forest is saying they're trying to implement the ecosystem-based management. We have some concerns around it. Right now, they're only at a 10% protection level, which is 1% more than the biodiversity guidebook, which says this area needs to have 9%, 1% more. That's where they're at right now. Their consultants, I quote I have like numerous direct quotes, slides from screen captures from the port, and over and over and over again, Madrone Environmental says, you got to go to 30%. 10%, you're in the red zone, which means biodiversity loss is going to continue. And if they just keep at 10% year after year after year, there's no opportunity to get to 30%. So that report is titled Red Alert, 10% is not enough. And then another report, just talking about logging roads, you know, they're there forever because they impact the soil so much. So what does that lead to? Illegal dump sites, poaching. It's a complete loss of the forest land base unless you do a real good job of restoration of those roads, which Community Forest wants to keep all their roads open for multi-use access. So if you have a 4x4 Jeep, you can go anywhere in all these roads. So they do not deactivate their roads. And then we're on to BCTS all the time about logging these beautiful mature forests that we have here. Everybody's probably familiar with the Old Growth Technical Review Panel. Just to comment on EW24, it was captured by the Old Growth Technical Review Panel as recruitment forest because there's 0 old growth left in the Wilson Creek watershed and that ecosystem. So it's an easy one. It came up on their aerial mapping, and so this zooms in and shows where the BCTS blocks are. And also we have, in this report, it shows the recruitment forest for EW24. So basically recruitment forest is where you have no old growth left. The Old Growth Technical Review Panel, which is fully supported by the NDP, says you need to recruit the mature forests so they become tomorrow's old growth, right? Because there's no old growth left. It's all gone. So old growth basically is where all that biodiversity is locked up. And so mature forests that haven't been logged before have an opportunity to get to that old growth state if left alone. And then lastly is from the Community Forest website, this is the Wilson Creek tenure area. So some of these blocks are in the park expansion area. So the third park over there, it's the smallest park, the most easterly one. They have 3 cup blocks, EW 19, EW 18A, and EW 18 all 3 of them are right adjacent to the park, which is like, so again, it runs completely counter to the Roberts Creek Community OCP calling for the expansion of the Mount Elphinstone Park. And I've talked to community forests about this. So these are our community forests. Do they ever ask us how we want to manage our community forests? They don't ask us. They just go ahead and log. And then we're forced to sometimes take, direct or activist type of action. Because it's basically one of the poorest managed community forests in all the province around public input. Boom, I landed it.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you, Ross. I'm going to invite Sarah Zielman from Community Forests to come and join us, and I'm just going to turn the projector back on.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for coming to join us here tonight. My name is Sarah Zielman. I'm the Executive Director for the Sunshine Coast Community Forest. I've been working with the Community Forest for just about 4 years and lived on the Sunshine Coast for 7 years. I came here to raise my family. My partner's from here, and so we have a lot of relatives here to help with the wee ones. So, what is a community forest? I know a lot of you were around during the inception of our community forest, and you already know a great deal about it, but not everybody does. It's actually one of the most common questions we get when we go to community events and community meetings. So I'm just going to kind of start with the basics. Community forests are a model of forestry that was created in response to community demand at a time when generally large corporations and the provincial government were making really big decisions that impacted communities around their community watersheds, around the areas that they recreate, so community forests were a model of forestry that allowed those areas to be controlled by local people and for local benefit. And so that is the same with our community forest today. We're governed by a volunteer board of directors, and I would like to introduce you to Jim Tivey, who is currently our acting chair.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Ross, for the presentation there. I thought that was quite good. Definitely great to see people putting themselves into this particular problem that we have. So about myself, I took environmental ed and I worked with the BC Public Interest Research Group. My connection was kind of wilderness travelers, outdoors people. Spent a lot of time in the outdoors in all parts of Canada, and of course in the wonderful Tet Park and up where I live. I was a logger in the summer and a tree planter, worked for the Ministry of Forest on IT problems. I'm interested in the right solutions, software and otherwise. I work in the software industry, but I find the forestry challenge, if you call it that, a very interesting problem, and I'd like to see the right solution. And you know, I admire the usual people, you know, Tommy Douglas with, you know, Pierre Trudeau, Just Society, Jody Wilson-Raybould with Speak Truth to Power, and the keepers of Roberts Creek as well, because I'm pretty well a newbie. I've been here 9 years, live in the Upper Creek, so came to this wonderful community that's very functional, and so I just want to thank everyone that came before and made this great community. So yeah, I'm on the volunteer board, been in forestry kind of concerns for 45 years, mostly a hobby, and that's, I think that this organization sort of has the right team. This community is the right community, and you know, I think we can make some differences. So that gives you an idea of where I'm coming from. Thank you. I guess we got Warren here.
Thank you, Jim. Just have a little bit more before it's Warren's turn. So community forests in general have a mandate, and just drilling down a little bit into our community forest and our model and how we work. We make up about 1% of the logging that happens on the Sunshine Coast. That's based on our annual allowable cut, which Warren may touch on a little bit more later. It's basically, we have an agreement with the province that makes us a community forest and gives us the opportunity to manage some area of forests around our community. And currently we're logging about a third of that. We're achieving about 70,000 of our allotted 20,000 right now. So there's some narrative around there about us being greedy and profit-driven and destroying everything as quickly as possible. And just want to point out that that is very far from the truth, as you'll hear through the rest of this evening. Oops, I skipped forward a little too fast there. In addition to our quite small footprint in the logging community on the Sunshine Coast, 100% of the benefits from the community forest go back to the community. The only way profits leave the community forest is through donations, programs, and legacy fund grants. 1% of the logging, 100% benefit to the community. To date, over $3 million have been contributed to the legacy fund, which has either been handed out in grants or remains in that fund for future community needs. When I say benefits to the community, I'm not going to list all the different things and things that we've funded and people who we've worked with, but I do want to call attention to one thing that we've been doing lately that's a little bit different. We started a community forest firewood program last year to help address the need for firewood in our community. How many people here heat with wood in their home? How many people have enough wood for this winter? How many people want to sign up for my firewood list after this? Thank you. Okay, so it's a great need in our community right now, and some people might have a lot of flexibility to use other options. The stories around this are quite unbelievable. Some of the people we've been connected with, we met because they were working with our program coordinator. They were actually living in a shelter because they weren't able to heat their home last winter, and they couldn't afford the electric alternative to their wood stove. And even if someone was willing to pay for firewood for them, they actually couldn't find any anywhere. And this is really central to the need for community forests, because it's about who the forests and wood products are for and who they are not for. How is it that so much wood can leave this place every year, and there's not one other operator out there who's willing to go out of their way to make sure the people who live here can get wood to heat their homes? I was wondering, how long have humans used wood to heat their homes? 1 million years. So over the course of 1 million years, we've kind of learned to plan our way out of giving actually everyone access just to heat their dwelling, with wood. So we tried to address that in 2 different ways, with both free personal use firewood permits for people who would like to go and collect wood in the community forest on their own, and also our firewood program for the many elderly people in our community who are unable to collect their own firewood anymore. And some of them are happy to have the opportunity to buy it at an affordable market price, and some of them are unable to pay for it, and we provide it at no cost. I'd like to thank Sarah earlier for her land acknowledgement, and would also like to touch back a little bit on that. It's one of those things that we say a lot, but sometimes maybe don't think enough about. So the community forest, in particular our entire area, is within the SWIA of the She-Shelf Nation. They are, I believe, the first self-governing Indian band in Canada since 1984. And since 2018, the process through which we work with them, it's called shared decision making. So they have the same authority over everything that we do as the provincial government. We don't get a cutting permit from the Ministry of Forest that hasn't been signed off on by Chief and Council. And this is a little infographic of the back and forth that happens throughout that. So we submit, as soon as it's a line on a map, we submit it to them. They check it against their existing land use plan, known cultural and archaeological sites, and their modern land use planning as well. So this process is conducted by the same people from the nation, the technical staff that sit on their land use planning table. So through that process, they're ensuring that we're not doing something that's going to interfere with the nation's desired use of that area. And so that's part of the umbrella that we work under. The rules that we follow are dictated both by the provincial forestry regulations as well as the She-Shelf Nation's desired use of their land. And with that, Warren is going to get a little more into the technical details about what we do with that.
Thanks, Sarah. Warren Hansen. I'm born and raised on the Sunshine Coast. Not too many people are like that. I know we have a few multi-generational families here. I lived in the Sea-Shelf area, and I became a forester. As part of being in forestry, I actually operated with forestry with Canfor. And for me, it was, I was young and really, understood the industrial model. It wasn't until I was with the Elphinstone local LRUP, so local resource use plan, where I met some very, very endearing friends. And we were both sides of the table. And we together were working 5 years, met some very endearing friends, Jen Britton being one of them, and Angela Croning, Adrian Belshaw, and Donna Sugar. And together we thought we had a really good process. In the middle of that, we were able to set aside our differences and come up with a good plan. It wasn't accepted, unfortunately, and they went away with doing the 3 parks. But we had a very good plan that was locally made and hopefully accepted. Would have been accepted by the local community. It did include recreation. It did include many aspects of what the community felt as being important, water and several different things. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that. Logging in the 90s and the Elphinstone Face, I got it. I got that there was a dissatisfaction with our community, people felt helpless and not being able to have a say. So the government created, over this time period, the government created community forests. And the community forest allows us local control. It allows us the ability to have communities get together as today, and get together as community advisory panels, get together to really shape forestry as we know it. I'm a director of the British Columbia Community Forest Association, and I'm proud of it. We're one of 60 community forests. They have their own unique problems. They have their own unique communities, and I found that we're not so dissimilar. We have the same issues as everyone else in BC. Locally controlled, having money stay back in the community rather than spending money, our money going to pay for a bridge across to Surrey. So it's important, that the community be involved with our community forest and enjoy the benefits that that it could provide. That's my thing. So where are we? And just a graphic representation of Half Moon Bay. We have 3 chart areas. It does include some pretty tough little spots. Chatham Creek being part of it. Angus, Grey Creek being another one. Those are 2 community watersheds. As you know, we have a water problem, water storage problem. We also operate in Half Moon Bay and in the Wilson Creek area, as Mr. Muir had discussed as well. What does it look like to the, whoops, wrong way. Uh-oh, I did it. I broke it. That's okay, I got it. I usually use a mouse. Sarah. All right. So there was, as it gets sort of down towards the Roberts Creek community, I wanted to kind of, we have lots of and some of our questions that we received from the community was about, what to do around private land and what to do around crown lands. And so we operate under the bottom of this tier here, and we're on crown lands. Private lands, everyone knows what private lands are. And that's where your OCP, your development permits, your regulations, your covenants, and your bylaws apply. If you own a piece of private land, the Sunshine Coast Regional District and their bylaws, or District of Sechelt and their bylaws, and their covenants and their regulations all apply for that. We're governed by something entirely different. We're governed by a license that's granted by the government. Government regulations, we do our plans and our studies, and we have community input, and then we have First Nations approvals. That's the realm that we operate in. So here, this is where we operate. This is the whole area here is in green is all waters that are draining from Mount Elphinstone. And as you can see, Mount Elphinstone really drains into the Howe Sound Basin in the Squamish Nation territory, Gibsons, as well as Roberts Creek and towards Wilson Creek. We are here. Whoops, sorry. We are here. We are this red area in here, and so we're part of your community. But BC Timber Sales is the major contributor to operating in behind Roberts Creek, and they couldn't be here today, unfortunately. I told them I wouldn't throw them under the bus, but it does speak to an absentee landlord that really doesn't want to spend the time and place to really engage with the community. So as part of my experiences with community forests, and we institute this new ecosystem-based management. And really what this means is to make sure that we have fully functioning ecosystems as we do work within our little area called the community forest. But it isn't all about protection, right? It's about having biodiversity and conservation and social well-being within the community, and making sure that the economy is as well. It's important that all those three are together, right? Because humans are part of our ecosystems, right? So we've, you know, as part of this is an ecosystem management is a vision. It's a model and a mission statement to really, okay, that's where we're going to be. And it's not about trying to look at what's happening on the ground right there in this one place and time. It's temporal. It's about what is this forest going to look like if we properly manage it using this model in 100 years, in 250 years from now, right? We're going to have old growth. We may not have old growth today, but we're going to set aside old growth for recruitment, so in 250 years from now, it'll be there for our children's children, right? We have to have a model that's going to survive 20 rotations or 50 rotations of government, right? You know, multiple generations, right? So, you know, the best time to act is today, so we can have, so we be able to, you know, take that first step forward. So this is a big slide, I realize now. But part of that ecosystem-based approach, you know, there's a lot of things that we're looking at. You know, yes, of course, there's protection. And we talked about, Elphinstone, Log and Focus, and Ross talked about 30%. Yes, we agree, right? We're trying to get there. We may not get there right today, but we want to build up to that ideal forest in, you know, 100 to 250 year horizon. Everyone needs to buy into this, because we're looking at the bigger picture here, right? We have management zones. Yes, we have needs for fire. We have to make sure that our forests are resilient to fire. Our forests are resilient to atmospheric rain events, you know, and also the use of the land, including recreation, trails, mushroom picking. You know, the more people we have, we're going to have more mushroom picking, right? So there's a lot of things that go on within our forests that isn't just like a passive management. Stand retention, restoration, silviculture, other things like, you know, especially protection of our culture, our indigenous culture. And with co-management agreements and working with our First Nations partners, we're looking at opportunities for them to practice their traditional culture. Yeah, so there's many other things, and then if we manage our forest properly, we'll have healthy ecosystems, we'll have biodiversity benefits, and we'll have better human well-being. So what are we doing today? We need to build a foundation. So we have an EBM planning team, and I have Lori Kremsetter from, she was on the Clackwood scientific panel, and she's also with the Great Bear Rainforest, and she knows ecosystem-based management. And if anybody's had her come and talk, it's fascinating about what they've learned along the way and what they're moving ahead with on the Great Bear Rainforest. So we have bi-weekly meetings, and our EBM is very science-led. And when that happens, we'll have a plan, and that plan will be to the community for more engagement. We need to know, in order to be doing good forestry or good ecosystem-based management, we need to know where, you know, blue and red list species are, where are old growth today, and where are the possibility for recruitments tomorrow as well, and where are the vulnerable ecosystems and biodiversity. And what I mean from that is that, you know, we're going to have these droughts. We're going to have, you know, large climatic events and things like that. We need to be able to, you know, protect those vulnerable ecosystems so they don't get further eroded. And then basically, right now we're just, you know, the harvest sustainability. I don't know if anybody can see that, but I'll read it out to you. It's about harvesting based on EBM reserves, and then reserves for old growth, and then ecosystem block assessments. And what that means is that there's no other licensee in our district right now that does ecosystem-based or ecosystem reserves or ecosystem assessments done within cut blocks. And it's not a requirement, but it's something that we felt as important to have linkages of what's happening in the tenure side and linkages down to make sure it's happening down on the block side. So the future. So what I want to do is, once we have these tenure-wide areas, we have the ability to do further planning. So we talked about 30% reserve design. So we have a reserve design that we're working on, and this is draft at the moment. But this is in the Roberts Creek area, and I'll let you know, we have those proposed cut blocks is now under a landscape reserve design. And the reason for that is, you know, I've had ecologists go in there, look at it, and say, yes, that is the best old growth recruitment and the best connecting corridors that we have for a park, a riparian area, and along Wilson Creek. So those are the things that we are looking at, you know, as real anchors for EBM, right? Corridors for creeks, wildlife, you know, it could be mushrooms, it could be trail systems, it could be a whole bunch of different things that can provide us that human well-being and ecosystem resilience. Then we get down into the operations plan. So we're doing all this planning, and then we say, okay, you know, here are our cut blocks. And this is just an example how we put those blocks together. And what you'll see in the future is you'll see that how the linkages between our ecosystem-based management, our landscape reserves, and how we're doing block planning around those areas. I have to say, ecosystem-based management on our end is voluntary. Voluntary, right? So the government's not telling us that we need to go in this way, right? Our community has told us we need to go in this way. Our nation has told us that we need to go in this way. So it's not that, you know, we're not just another logging company. What's next in the next 10 years? We need to revisit our AAC. We need to find what that means is that, you know, we are providing for other values, other intrinsic values that are important to our community. Special places, ecosystems, recreation, a whole bunch of different things, and talking about, you know, environmental services are recognized in this model. Ecosystem restoration projects. Yeah, you know, we got a community forest that was highly impacted by industrial activity, highly impacted by private land, highly impacted by fires, highly impacted by many other things over the last 200 years of people, you know, developing the Sunshine Coast. And there's opportunities for us to go and do ecosystem restoration, wetland restoration, as you've been seeing in some other places around Fair Lake. Wildfire resilience, and really that's, you know, doing treatments around the urban interface areas where we have it. Example is, you know, Sandy Hook in the Tawanik area. There's one road in and one road out. And we need to provide them time for if a massive fire comes through, and providing that corridor, safe corridor for them to travel on. And that means doing some wildfire treatments in the area, as an example. As well, we're looking at carbon projects, you know, and that will take time. There's atmospheric benefits agreements that need to happen with the government and the First Nations. And but I think we have a really good story to tell, and we have a really good story to give to other people that want to, and credits to be able to sell back to investors. Also, a big push on recreation. We have a great resource. I'm a past president of a mountain bike association. I'm still a director of the Sunshine Coast Trail Society, and I think that we have a real jewel. We have a real jewel in the Roberts Creek area. It's first class, and I think that's something to be proud of. And that was all volunteer built, and the biggest amenity that we have that's been volunteer. And then also we're into enhanced community engagement, and we have a community advisory panel, and I see some of the members here, which is great. And we have a community engagement coordinator here as well. And I'm proud of this group, and I'm really looking forward to the quality conversations that they can provide for our community forest. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. We have about 5 minutes left, so I'll just take advantage of that while you're all here. So in addition to Jim, one of our volunteer directors whom you've already met, I just also wanted to call attention to I see two other directors that we have here, David King and Bob Mitcher. So, it's a really complicated topic. I'm hoping that everyone, after listening first to Ross Muirhead and then to us, is understanding that there are a lot of things that people want and that just don't fit into this societal structure that we exist within. A square peg trying to fit in a round hole, right? So it's a pretty hard problem. It's not a super fun job, and the pay is the only thing worse than municipal government, But if you're not happy with the community forest, if you feel like, oh, they're not listening to the community, we put calls out every year for our board of directors. We now have a community advisory panel that we've also been advertising very heavily over the last 8 months for people to get involved with and reach out to us if they're interested. It's a hard problem to solve, and we're not going to do it by ourselves. And the other thing is, this all sounds very nice, right? Oh, ecosystem-based management. You're going to protect the ecosystems, and you're going to log less, and you're going to choose to do it. And that sounds just great, right? This is a plan, a draft of a plan. It's not even a draft of a plan yet. This is a vision that we are trying to build, and we're going to go to the nation and to the Ministry of Forests and the province and say, look, we need to renegotiate the agreement that we have in place, because this is how our community wants to manage the forest around them. And if we do that as a united community, if we have strong community support and we've had a very high level of engagement and feedback and input into that plan, in the current socio-political environment that we're all existing in, I would have a really hard time imagining that they could say no to whatever this community wants to do with its forest. And I would argue that anyone who believes in conservation and loves the forest and wants to do right by it should get on board and be part of the team and put their excellent research efforts towards working with us and supporting us and building this vision together. If we can accept that there will be some logging in this area, and we can put together a plan that still manages for harvest, so we have opportunities for work in the logging industry and for locally grown timber supply and for firewood for our community that's close to home. If you can get on board with that, then connect with us. Please reach out, follow us on social media, sign up for our e-newsletter, and if you're interested in being super involved, then put your name in the ring for a director seat next time it comes up. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. We had a number of questions pre-submitted, which enabled me to share them with both ELF and SCCF. prior to this evening, so they're questions that they have seen and are prepared for. I'm going to suggest we take sort of 5 minutes as a little bit of a stretch break, grab coffee and cookies, etc. And then we will come back and I will run through the questions. I'll invite them to join me up here and take a mic. questions, to be fair, I mean, the questions are actually directed specifically to like some are directed to ELF, some are directed to community forests. There's probably more directed to community forests, but whatever. It's like, they like people when they emailed said, this is a question for community forest or ELF. All right, if I can invite ELF and community forest reps to come back up to the stage, that would be great. So the thought process behind having questions pre-submitted was to eliminate duplicates and also to make sure that the questions remained more or less focused on what the RCCA's original intent was, which was to learn more about the organizations, what their mandates are, what they do, how they do it. The questions have all been sent to both ELF and to community forests in advance. I had a few come in as late as this afternoon. They were all sent anonymously, so I just cut and paste them into an email. There were a couple of questions relating to zoning and bylaws, and I'm not going to ask those. That isn't sort of within the purview of this education seminar. Second of all, neither of these two organizations really have the ability to make changes to zoning and bylaws, et cetera. So those are valuable questions, but I'm not going to ask those. So we did have a question, and I will also say that if anyone here is uncomfortable answering a question, or if you feel that the question is inappropriate for this forum, having seen them in advance, or you would prefer that it be addressed in private or whatever, feel free to say so, right? So if you get a question and you're like, actually, I'd rather just address that directly with an individual, totally fine. Okay, just say so. So that mic in front of you is live. Use it, don't use it, whatever you choose. But know that we have Raven Shaw here from the Elfie TV program who is filming. You will be heard better if you use the mic. Okay, so the first question, I'm going to ask this one right off the hop. How is your organization funded? So where does your funding come from, and where does it go to?
Thank you. So primarily we're funded by the sale of logs from the community forest. This year our firewood program did have an element of firewood for sale, so that was a first for that revenue source. And we also applied for and received some Work BC granting for our firewood program employees. Certainly as we look to take on plans that will result in our AAC most probably decreasing a decent amount, we're looking to diversify funding. So those were pretty small amounts this year, but first steps in wading into other funding for us for sure.
In terms of ELF's funding, if our bookkeeper was here, she could verify that. Over the last 5 years anyways, our annual operating budget's about $10,000. At the end of the year, we spend that amount. We might have a couple $100 left. So as a nonprofit, we're mandated to spend everything that comes in to our bank account. We do have received grants from the West Coast Environmental Law. So what we do is we will propose a project to them, and then they assign a lawyer to and an expert. So currently we have one project underway that's funded by West Coast Environmental Law. It's looking at elk habitat on the lower Sunshine Coast predominantly. So right now there's no protection for winter habitat for elk, which is actually a requirement that the Ministry of Forests has mandated. The Sunshine Coast Forest District is the only district, for whatever reason, they chose not to protect elk habitat, and predominantly it's low elevation winter habitat. So we hired a biologist to do what they call transits, looking at different forest conditions that are suitable for elk habitat, and then the lawyer component is to write up an opinion whether there's a legal avenue to pursue.
Great.
And then we get $10 here and there from community members, $30, But just let you know, young people, there's no money in conservation. Only in extraction, so it's not a wise career choice.
Super, thanks, Ross. So the next few questions were directed specifically to community forest. So what are community forest's thoughts on logging and its impact on flooding? Is the first one.
It's done really sustainably. I think we have to look at making sure that our roads are resilient to flooding in these atmospheric events. We did have some issues last year. And it really identified that we have to have a verbose deactivation. We deactivated our 14 kilometers or 16 kilometers of road last year, and we're doing the same this year. We don't leave our roads all open for 4x4s, and so that's the plan. Also, too, we're looking at making sure that we plant and we manage our forests quickly, and making sure that we have healthy forests growing to make sure that there's no rapid rainfall off our cutthroat. The one thing we have to remember too, it's also downhill. We have Canyon Creek, say for instance, there was a flood there. We did a thorough analysis of the watershed, and we found that there was no fault. What was fault was highways. And we found that we found eventually later that the reason for the Canyon Creek culvert was a block culvert. There was a boulder that was in there. So some things that may seem blatantly obvious was trying to be blamed on other people. So in fact, actually, it was the critical infrastructure that we have for highways, that we have for municipal roads, that we're having for a lot of things are critically undersized, especially with climate change. And we're going to see 15% more water increases in water hydrology in the next 50 years. And so the community forest has taken that on, and so we're sizing our culverts to making sure that the lifetime of our culverts are enduring for climate change.
The next question is related. Is logging increasing drought conditions as natural drainage and land absorbing? So forest floors keeping moisture intact. So land absorbing integrity are being eroded.
So it's a good question, and I had a bit of time to think about it. So in our cut blocks and for the areas that we harvest, we harvest less than 1% per year. But as you watch a harvest area grow, there's a rapid establishment of herbaceous layer, rapid establishment of other, shade, and that drought conditions, or however that's perceived, is being mitigated almost right away within the first couple of years. One of the biggest retainers of moisture is also things like, if you think about bark mulch, so the breakdown of soils or breakdown of the forest floors as things become to weather. But what rapidly replaces that is the trees and the herbaceous layer that replaces that. So, yeah, that's a cycle.
Is logging creating more dangerous trees that are then deemed necessary for removal due to safety, rather than leaving forests intact to manage breaking windstorms?
The single tree retention in cut blocks is something that we've been concerned about since kind of monitoring the logging across the Sunshine Coast. So both licensees, BC Timber South and Community Forest, will leave single trees standing in a cut block. So they'll leave, say, a standing old-growth Douglas fir, or also commonly the western white pine, which is an endangered species. So as you probably know, trees grow in a community. They don't grow as a single stem or a single, they call them single stems, but a single tree, right, on its own. It's supported by a community of trees. So when they leave a single tree in a cut block, what you eventually will see is the branches start breaking off. One of the community forest cut blocks over in Wilson Creek, I've revisited over the years. That was cut about 12 years ago. So what you start to see is there's more wind surface against the trunk, so the trees sway more. The branches will snap off, and then again that results in more surface area, so the tree will sway even further, and then the tops will tend to snap off. And then from there, it's just a slow death to the tree. Same with all the western white pines that leave behind. I would say 50% of those become a danger tree due to that kind of dynamic. So, basically, if you have an old-growth Douglas fir tree that's of importance, it should have at least a 2-hectare buffer around it, I would say. At least 2 tree length kind of buffer to really make it a resilient, wind-firm buffer.
Great, thanks, Ross. So the next question is directed to Alf. As I understand it, the community forest is under obligation to cut their AAC, and if they don't cut it, the province will award that volume to another licensee. Alf has also said previously that they would like the District of Sechelt to give up the community forest. The question is, who would Alf like to see take over the community forest license? And how does Alf believe that a new licensee would be better than the Sunshine Coast Community Forest?
Yeah, I think the province has said to community forests when they first got their license that the maximum that they could log is 20,000 cubic meters a year, but that's the maximum, so they have a lot of discretion in how much they choose to log per year. For instance, like the community forest in the town of Whistler, they decided to reduce their AAC down to 6,000 cubic meters, and they're going to take that shortfall and sell the other cubic meters as carbon credits to industries for carbon offsets. Yeah, one other related to that is the fact that the community forest did take on the Chapman and Grey Creek community watersheds in their tenure, but at that point, when they first got the license, they made it quite clear they weren't going to log in the community watersheds for 20 years. However, that entire land base was part of the calculation for the 20,000 cubic meters. Okay, so that put an inflated amount of pressure on the 3 other, Half Moon Bay, Burnett, Angus, and Wilson.
Sorry, excuse me, Ross, I'm just going to bring you back to the
Yeah.
question, though. So the question really is, how does ELF believe that a new licensee would be better than the existing licensee?
We've never said anything about community forests should give up their license. Sometimes they will use that as kind of a fear tactic. Oh, if we don't log our 20,000 cubic meters a year, the province will give it over to BCTS. I think that's highly unlikely. They're now established in the community. It would be politically, just not it would be embarrassing to provincial government to do that. So the fact of the matter is that, but they do have a lot of discretion around how much they log per year.
Sure. Yeah, we get that. Yeah.
So we do have an agreement called Community Forest Agreement K3F, signed by a couple of directors at the time and the Chief Forester of BC, and it does lay out in that document that we have an AAC of 20,000, and it's certainly not a maximum, it's a target. I believe Warren's talked to the Cheakamus Community Forest Manager, and basically that manager was somewhat unsure how much longer they would be able to get away with not logging their AAC, so it is definitely a conversation that comes to roost at some point with the province for any community forest. In their case, they're funded by the resort municipality of Whistler that is, I believe, they're one of their shareholders. And so that's how they're able to come up with the funds to develop carbon projects and maybe buy their way out of their AAC and that kind of thing. For us, it's not totally an option at this time.
Thank you. Question for Community Forest. Would the Community Forest commit to protecting 30% of the community forest starting today for the sake of the entire ecosystem?
It's a good question. So we are looking at that right now. We're trying to balance all the different elevation bioclimatic zones, and looking at in some places we are way above target. We have a no old growth policy, no logging old growth policy, and so we've been making sure that is followed. So down in the lower reaches, close to urban areas, we have very little old growth. We understand that, and so we're looking at opportunities for old growth recruitment. We need to make sure that we may not make 30%, but over time we plan to, and so making sure that we can do treatments within areas that are disconnected, that we can now put as a corridor or something like that with some more treatments and managed treatments to be able to induce old growth attributes sooner. So it's something that needs to be planned, it needs to be thought about, and it needs to be agreed with the community before we make that commitment.
Also to Community Forest, how is forestry similar to food crop agriculture, and how is it different?
All around the world, forestry is considered an agro-crop, and it doesn't happen here. In different places around the world, they use invasive species, radiated pine, non-indigenous species, radiated pine in New Zealand, in different places like that to grow as much fiber as possible. Here we have very robust regulations to be able to, we had to plant the same species for the site. So Douglas fir, in this case, western and red cedar and other things. So we can't plant black walnut or butter walnut or something like that, because it's a more, maybe a more better cash crop. It doesn't work like that. So, we also manage for all the different other values as well, even, recreation being one of them, on the same lands. So it's a lot different. And so, yeah, forestry is on its own in BC.
What guides the choice of species for replanting?
Basically we have, like I've said, regulations. We have foresters that go and classify the site for ecosystems and making sure that we plant trees. And so that's a requirement, and there has been questions that do you plant trees, because some other people say it's deforestation and it's not deforestation. So we plant, we plant and we monitor our trees, and we tend them. We don't use herbicides. We use sort of chainsaw methods, manual brushing, hand labor, to make sure that those trees are free growing. And then past that, we're looking at opportunities for other things like commercial thinning, biosolids, fertilizations, and things like that, to be able to help grow and get more volume on more volume on each and every hectare that we're responsible for.
Ross, did you want to add to that?
In terms of the question where it asks, is forestry in BC run based on the agricultural model? I would say yes, in fact, it clearly is. Some of the first foresters in BC were Europeans, and my lineage is part of that. So, but the agricultural model was applied to forestry in BC, where it was, remove the existing forest cover, because when the early settlers came here, right, it was just the dark primary forest was reached its old growth state, which they call it the climax state. So there was no more actual growth happening in these old decadent forests, is what they called them. So they applied the agricultural model, which was to clear the land of the existing resource to plant a crop, right? So the crops were the trees. And that model has persisted to today, where I think Warren kind of alluded to that. How do we grow, the trees faster so we get a higher volume and hopefully a shorter rotation? So unlike an indigenous approach that might go in and take, a few trees here and there for particular uses, or eco-forestry techniques where you can remove some trees without destroying the forest, the clear-cutting method, which is still the predominant method today, is the agricultural model. Clear the land, replace it with another entity, which is a tree farm.
So, question for Elf. How has the Shishal Nation been engaged regarding Elf's campaigns focused on land use planning, specifically the Mount Elphinstone Park expansion? Specifically interested in whether the Shishal Nation supports the park expansion or is opposed to the campaign.
As I said earlier, there is the Seashell Victoria Modern Land Use Plan underway right now, and we were invited to make a presentation. I did that along with their hereditary chief, Haywas Cragen, and he supports further ecosystem protection, whether it's a park or not, or co-manage with Sea Shelter Squamish Nation. That's entirely up to the nation to decide whether they see economic opportunities for ecotourism. That's the final decision on how the SWAYA will be managed is, I have no idea. I'm not privy to those discussions. When Donna Sugar was the regional district rep, she had very good relations with the council, with the Seashell Council, and she was trying to show that the Elphinstone Forest should be considered a watershed, right? It's not a typical kind of drainage, like the Chapman or Dakota or Rainy River, but it is a watershed because so many of the people here are dependent upon groundwater flow for wells and water diversions. And so at the time, the council, with Calvin Cragen as the chief, did make, I think it was around 2017, made a declaration supporting the protection of all the forests across the Elphinstone slopes as a watershed.
This is a question for both of you. Hypothetically, could the Lower Coast ever become wood neutral and supply all of its own wood product needs?
I would be line as a forester to, that would be the dream, to cut a tree, have a mill close by, and use it for everyone's house. But unfortunately, it doesn't occur that way. There's supply chains, there's the realities of borrowing money, and the lack of fiber that we would have to be able to have that kind of initiative. It's a bit of a reality check that we're governed by transportation systems that are inadequate. We're governed by a ferry that good luck trying to be on time, and that really affects the ability for costs. So this is the reason why we have very little mill capacity here on the Sunshine Coast, except for a couple of millers, and we do sell our logs to those millers when we have the right products for them. And so a lot of them cut free of hard timbers and use it for their own, use it for houses on here on the Sunshine Coast, and we do provide for the 3 or 4 loads of logs that are destined to those mills. Yes, wood first for our community. That's a priority for us, and then regional sales afterwards. And we don't export our wood.
Ross, what are your thoughts? Could we become wood neutral and supply all of our own wood product needs?
Well, historically, the Sunshine Coast did supply a lot of its timber for shade cutting for the early days, but and you can still see remnants of that on the Elphinstone Forest. But as it was mentioned earlier, the chief forester sets the annual elbow cut every 5 years, and that's mainly driven by the demand for timber by the sawmills and for export to overseas to the United States. And so the AAC is always set ecologically way out of balance. The AAC is set by the chief forester. Okay, we're not.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. We're going to have a bun fight. So the question, but the question actually, Ross, so hang on, the question actually what really is it a pipe dream to think that we could become wood neutral? Is that a pipe dream, or is that a possibility? It's a pipe dream. Okay, super, thank you. The final question I have to community forests. On the lower slope of Mount Elphinstone, there has been a lot of research relating, alternative harvesting and silviculture systems. That's an incoherent sentence. Can you please explain why there isn't more commercial thinning done, particularly when there is a shortage of pulp fiber that is close to pulp mills? Is it possible to increase the volume grown in the community forest tenure while still protecting and enhancing values that the community places on the forest?
So I did think about this for a little while, but EW24 is a classic example. That was a commercial thin block back in the 90s. There are people that were harvesting in those areas back in the 90s. So, but over time, the government actually took away the subsidy for the ability for us to do commercial thinning. Forest companies were forced to not do commercial thinning, unfortunately. Community forest is actually looking for more opportunities for commercial thinning, and I think it's a good way to utilize fiber for our pulp mill, who's definitely needing some fiber supply. And perhaps maybe there could be a wood products industry that could be built around it. It needs special machines, special know-how to extract small timber like that. I'll be leaning on our loggers to come up with innovative ways to make that happen for me. But my vision is to have alternative systems. My vision is to have opportunities for commercial thinning and to be able to have a diverse examples of sustainable harvesting.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. That's the end of my questions. I would like to say, as somebody who started out this evening not actually knowing very much about sustainable forestry, forestry on the coast, I'm hearing far more in common here than I am different. Maybe that's because everybody's got their best courteous faces on. But I actually am hearing quite a bit more in common than I'm hearing differences. So thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. If I could ask you to all put your chairs away, that would simplify my life and actually my teenage son's life, because otherwise he's going to have to do it.